Good afternoon. Please be seated. Thank you all for braving the weather out there, getting through the snow today. And while it is pretty for us to watch, it does provide some challenges for folks across the Commonwealth, our law enforcement, our first responders, our firefighters, and our utility workers. So I would like to just offer a couple of comments about the snowstorm before we talk about the budget. Our state and local authorities are all working hard to keep our roads safe. VDOT crews are working around the clock. Motorists are strongly encouraged to stay off the roads unless you're coming to this press conference. This is a heavy, wet snow in some areas of the Commonwealth. VDOT is coordinating with tree removal and utility crews to address any fallen debris on or near our roadways. As of this morning, our Virginia State Police had responded to 244 traffic accidents. Fortunately, none of these accidents were fatal, and in the majority of cases, the only damage was to the vehicles that were involved. The Virginia Department of Emergency Management is working with localities that are affected by the snow, responding to requests for assistance. It's important that people check the forecast. The temperature is expected to drop tonight, which could lead to roads freezing over. Be cautious and be neighborly. Check on elderly neighbors. Clean off your snow off your vehicle before you drive so it does not fly onto someone else's vehicle. And please give our snow plows room as needed. Regarding the budget, back in December, we proposed a 2-year budget. It made a number of important investments in areas that were a priority for me. That budget focused on making Virginia work better for everyone, growing our economy, and building a healthier and better trained workforce. It expanded health care access to nearly 400,000 Virginians who need it. And it responded to a significant concern of many, including the bond rating agencies, that we did not have enough cash in reserve to insulate Virginia against unexpected revenue shortfalls. Since we introduced that budget, a lot has taken place. I became governor. I'm glad you all are laughing. And a new General Assembly came to town. While they were here in Richmond, they passed more than 800 bills. Many of those bills represented a new atmosphere of bipartisanship here on Capitol Square that allowed us to move forward on issues that matter to Virginians' lives. But unfortunately, despite much effort on everyone's part, the General Assembly did not pass the most important bill of all, and that's the budget bill. I've called legislators back to Richmond on April the 11th to complete their work on the budget. Today, I will introduce the budget that will guide the discussion. And I hope that discussion will result in a balanced spending plan that expands health care coverage to Virginians who need it and invest in priorities that will make our economy stronger. You'll find that it looks a lot like the initial budget we introduced in December. In fact, it's the exact same budget with one key difference, which I'll address in a moment. Like our budget in December, this budget includes provisions to bring Virginians' tax dollars home from Washington and expand Medicaid. Throughout this legislative session, my team and I worked with the General Assembly, particularly the House of Delegates, to find common ground and advance a compromise on expanding health coverage. That work brought us closer to getting this done than ever before. I'm still willing to work with them and listen to their concerns. However, in light of the General Assembly's difficulty in finding that common ground before the regular session adjourned, I'm proposing a budget that returns to what we would call a clean Medicaid expansion without work requirements. This has always been the simplest way to get health care access to the most people, and it remains the most cost-effective way. My goal has never changed. I want every Virginian to have access to good, affordable health care, and I want us to help those who need help the most. No family should be one illness or accident away from financial ruin. Expanding access would mean nearly 400,000 working Virginians could get insurance. It would create jobs and help our rural hospitals. It would provide us with additional resources for mental health and substance abuse treatment. Our opioid epidemic is one of the most pressing problems we face right now. Last year, we lost around 1,200 Virginians to overdoses of either prescription opioids or heroin and fentanyl. We need more resources to provide treatment, to help people break the cycle of addiction, and to prevent addiction. I say that as a doctor. My life's work before I got into public service was to help improve people's health. In politics, that hasn't changed. And as a businessman, I was not one to leave money on the table. We're leaving $6 million a day on the table every day we don't expand access. Those are tax dollars we're paying to the federal government that we don't get back. That money could do so much to improve the lives of all Virginians. Taking back those federal dollars for health care will help free up state dollars. To illustrate the impact, that additional revenue allows us to invest $108 million in additional dollars in higher education. Investment in our higher education and in our workforce certification and apprenticeship programs helps ensure that a diploma or a credential is not out of reach for Virginians. It allows us to put $516 million more into K-12 education. Investing in K-12 and in our vocational technology programs is important, so when kids graduate, they're well prepared for whatever additional education or training they need to get good 21st century jobs. And we're budgeting $101 million to give our law enforcement officers, state workers, firefighters, and teachers a well-deserved pay raise. From a business perspective, a medical perspective, and a government efficiency perspective, Medicaid expansion makes sense. As I said, I remain open to working with members of both chambers and both parties to move this conversation forward in a way that works for everyone. The product that was on the table at the end of the regular session was the product of a serious negotiation. I opposed many of the provisions that Republicans in the House of Delegates insisted upon, and I continue to believe that we should expand coverage in the simplest and least restrictive way we can. However, in government, you have to work together to get things done for the people. We're on the path to doing that on health care, and I look forward to finishing the job as the special session opens on April the 11th. The budget that I'm sending down is a little different in one respect from what was proposed in December. I am proposing an amendment to shore up the Commonwealth's finances by ensuring that any additional revenues above the level set in our forecast will not be spent, but rather set aside in our reserve fund to protect Virginia against a sudden downturn. In Virginia, we have long been proud of our AAA bond rating, the highest rating the bond agencies can give. That rating has survived previous budget impasses. Last year, Standard & Poor's ratings affirmed our AAA bond rating, but they changed our rating outlook from stable to negative. They did that for two reasons. First, they believed that Virginia could face economic headwinds in the future due to continued uncertainty in Washington. Second, S&P was concerned about our budgeted withdrawals from the Revenue Stabilization Fund during the current biennium. In response, the December budget put more money into our reserve fund, and the amendment I propose will set even more dollars aside for that rainy day. Our revenues have seen an uptick, but it's important that we not spend that additional money. This amendment will direct any surplus dollars to the reserve fund. Doing so will strengthen our reserves and ensure there is greater structural balance in our budget. While there has been some talk about doing a revenue reforecast, I believe this amendment will adequately address the situation in a fiscally conservative way. Just last week, S&P assured us that their credit rating and outlook is unchanged by our current budget situation. But a protracted budget impasse might change their minds. It's imperative that we all get to work and reach an agreement on a budget that expands coverage soon. Our local governments need it, our state agencies need it, the credit agencies need it, and the thousands of Virginians who are waiting for health care access need it. This is our opportunity to show Virginians and the world that chaos and partisan warfare may dominate Washington, but here in Richmond, we still work together to do the right thing for our people, not our political party. Between now and April 11th, Secretary Aubrey Lane and his team will work with the members and staff of the General Assembly money committees to ensure that we can advance a budget as quickly as possible when they return to Richmond. I am confident that we can find common ground on a budget that makes Virginia work better for everyone, no matter who they are or where they live. Thank you, and I should have recognized if you didn't notice, he's standing up here with me, but our Secretary of Finance, Aubrey Lane, and we'll be glad to take questions. Thank you all.
A couple questions? The General Assembly left town without making an appointment to fill the vacancy on the State Corporation Commission. Are you planning to appoint somebody to that spot between now and April 11th?
Well, obviously it is a very important position. It is the job of the General Assembly, the Senate and the House to make that choice, and I'm going to allow them to pursue that when they come back on April the 11th. Obviously we're going to be focused on the budget as well, and if they're unable to make that choice, then I will step in and do that. But I think I want to give them the first chance to do that.
Laura?
Have there been any meetings with the money committee members since people left town, or did everyone just take a break?
Well, we have encouraged, Laura, folks to go home and be with their families and listen to their constituents and allow their input. But obviously we have been talking to fellow legislators and negotiating, and I have encouraged them to continue that communication, and when they come back here on April the 11th to be ready to complete our budget, and then on reconvene session, which will be a week later on April the 18th, that we want to get a budget that includes expansion and that will be good for the Commonwealth.
Dave?
Governor, it sounds like you're proposing a starting point, but that you're not expecting this to be the ending point. Is that a fair read of what you're doing here?
Yes, it is, and this is, as I said in my comments, a similar budget, almost the exact budget aside from the amendment. And what I've tried to do is allow them to be in a position that makes their negotiations as easy as possible, and rather than complicate things and introducing a new budget with different amendments, I wanted it to be straightforward, and they can pick up where they left off, and we'll continue our negotiations once they get back on April the 11th.
Kevin?
How do you hope to bridge the gap where you've seen the sticking point on Medicaid expansion with the Republicans in the Senate who've been opposing it, particularly over the concern of containing the costs later on?
Absolutely.
How do you hope to meet a common ground on that?
Well, you know, we're very close, and we were close when we adjourned, and closer than we've ever been here. We've been doing this for the last 4.5 or 5 years. So I'm encouraged, as I said earlier, that we have allowed our legislators to go home, catch their breath, because it is a busy 60 days, listen to their constituents, and then come back, and we'll continue our negotiations. But I don't think we're that far apart, and I'm always been a glass is half full person, but this is important, as I just said. It's the most important bill that we have here in Virginia. We come here every year, but every 2 years we produce a budget, and it's just so important for our agencies and for everybody across the Commonwealth. I think they understand that. It's also important, as I said, for our bond rating agencies, and again, this is their job. I'm going to help be there with them every step of the way, but I will encourage them and make sure that by April the 18th that we have a budget that suits Virginia and that expands coverage.
Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.